everyone, what's up? My name is Joss and welcome back to my channel squibblesreads. So today's video is the big one, the one that I am so excited to film every single year, my top 10 favorite books of 2017. I will also link my end of the year playlist up in the card as well as down in the down bar below. It includes my reading goals for 2018, my last book haul of 2017, the worst books of 2017, my top 10 books that I want to read in 2018, and also the next video that I'm going to post, which is my most anticipated releases of 2018. So that playlist will be up there in the card and in the down bar below. But today I will go through my top 10 favorite books in really no particular order. There is kind of like a very clear top 4 to me and then the other 6, but within that 6 and within that 4, again, no particular order. They are all extremely stellar and unique in their own way. Kicking it off with The Unseen World by Liz Moore, we have our protagonist Ada Sibelius, who is raised and homeschooled in a computer science lab in the 1980s in Boston by her father David and his colleagues. They are both extremely intelligent but don't have a lot of friends or connections socially. Unfortunately, David starts to forget things and doesn't think as clearly as he used to, so Ada falls into the care of one of his colleagues at the lab. She starts going to public school, and she also at this time finds out that David is not exactly who he says he is, so she goes on this mission to make sure that she finds out who he is and figure everything out. One of my favorite things was just seeing Ada grow up through the course of this book. Because the book was written in third person, I really felt as though I was right next to her. It also included some of her inner thoughts, so it really felt like I was her caretaker or her friend. It was definitely a good use of the third person perspective. She's also a badass, smart woman in STEM, and along her journey, she learns different skills as she interacts with different people, like interaction, persuasion, just a genuine connection with others. For example, when she's trying to find out who David is, one of her stops is to the library to get more information about his past and his history. Also, themes like the bonds of family, the impact of shame, and Ava and David's really strong but complex father-daughter relationship, which I think is definitely something that we need to see more of in books. This was the first book of 2017 that I really remember being like, wow, that could be one of my favorite books. It didn't actually become one of my favorite books until I started compiling my list, and I was like, wow, that really grew on me over the course of the year. Next up is Autobiography by Christina Lauren. I finished this book several days ago and I knew that it immediately had to go on my favorites list. This is about our protagonist Tanner. He is bisexual and he has moved from California to a small town in Utah called Provo, where there is a large Mormon population. He was out in California, but he hasn't told anyone in Provo that he is bisexual. So his best friend Autumn persuades him to sign up for this extremely rigorous seminar class for writing in his high school, where all the students in that class have to complete writing a book before the end of the semester. It's mentored by a student whose name is Sebastian. He graduated the previous year and his book got picked up by a publisher and he has made it really big in the book world. On the first day of seminar class, Sebastian, this really hot dude, walks in and Tanner is like, I like you. I mean, probably not like that with that face that I just made, because the novel would just end right there, but you get what I mean. Anyways, what I liked about this book, it taught me a lot about the Mormon church and traditional Mormon beliefs, which is admittedly something that I did not have a lot of knowledge about before I read this, and also how people approach relationships when the other person or people in the relationship have different beliefs from them. Setting boundaries for yourself while also acknowledging your partner or whoever's beliefs and still loving them for who they are. We see how some relationships can sever when the dynamics between those beliefs isn't tolerable for one or more parties. I also just loved the romance in here. Christina Lauren is two authors that write as a team, but they primarily write romance novels, and I think that all of their experience there showed in this book. But what really got me is, like, I can't really say without giving spoilers, but I have a very hazy rose-colored glasses kind of look at books that talk about writing, particularly writing that directly reflects on the person's life who's writing it, if that makes any sense. There is one teeny little phrase that I had an issue with in this book, and that phrase is, "What happened back there is tattooed onto every synapse I have." Sometimes the neuron and brain symbolism stuff doesn't quite work out in all cases, but regardless, the combination of the writing class, the romance, the relationship dynamics hit me right there in the feels. Next book probably comes as no surprise to you guys. This is Celeste Ng's sophomore novel, Little Fires Everywhere. This is a little weird, but this is the only book that I did an individual book review video for in 2017. Anyways, this takes place in the suburb of Shaker Heights, Ohio, where we have a family of a mom and dad, 4 kids, called the Richardsons. They live comfortably in a large house in the suburbs, and they have a rental property that they rent to a mom whose name is Mia. She is an artist. She lives from paycheck to paycheck. Mia has a high school-aged daughter named Pearl who starts hanging out with the Richardson kids. There are two simultaneous plot lines. One is that Mrs. Richardson starts to dig into Mia's past because she is wary of her history, and the other one is that Mrs. Richardson's family friends, the McCulloughs, adopt a Chinese baby. Mia uncovers something a little hinky with the adoption, and thus there is a custody battle for the baby. We learn a lot about these families' beliefs, especially about adoption, racism, and raising children. The first major plot point happens about a quarter of the way through, and from here I kind of made the comparison that it is similar in tone and some of the themes as Celeste's first novel, Everything I Ever Told You, but it has the momentum and the pacing of something like Big Little Lies, where it is very readable and you just want to keep reading more. The metaphor of little fires being started is extended throughout the book, starting in the dedication. It says, "To those out on their own paths, setting little fires." That acts as a metaphor for questioning the status quo, and that comes up many different times in the book. My favorite example is in one of the scenes, a Chinese character brings up the tokenization of Chinese and Asian people in media and books, often reducing them down to a stereotype, very unfortunately. There's also another scene where a character talks about the lack of Chinese-looking dolls for kids to play with, and when there are Chinese-looking dolls, the prices are marked up exorbitantly. Another one is where they question the line, "We live in a place that doesn't see race," and it talks about why ignoring things like race end up being hurtful to some people. The women in the story all have their own distinct individual personality, and they each kind of set their own little fire in their lives and question their own status quo, whether that's voluntarily or due to the things that are going on. I have to admit, I was a little frightened when I heard that Celeste was coming out with another novel. I thought, how could anything top Everything I Never Told You? I can't say that it topped Everything I Never Told You, but they are definitely equal. I loved it just as much for different reasons, but definitely just as much. My next favorite book does not come in a physical copy. It is only an ebook, and this is the first book in a series called An Unseen Attraction by KJ Charles. This is like a twofer. It's a half Victorian mystery and half romance. One of our protagonists is a man named Clem who runs a lodging house. Our other protagonist is a man who's staying in the lodging house named Rolly, who is a taxidermist. They start flirting and touching, and it gets real steamy. Unfortunately, they encounter a dead body of another lodger one night, and they start to try and find out how and why and all of that stuff. Something that I loved about this, Clem experiences some anxiety symptoms in situations where there's a lot of stimulation going on. For example, loud noises, bright flashing lights, and really big crowds. Rolly is also super introverted and very particular, and their romance is a slow-burning romance. And they try and work out how much each of them is able to adapt for the other one in the relationship, but also set boundaries and ask for what they need when they need it. So that whole dynamic was just A+. Rolly also confronts his own privilege when he sees Clem feeling hurt about things that other people say to him or have said to him in the past due to the color of his skin. There was some discrimination during this time. He is half British and half Indian. I also think the taxidermy part was handled well. Rolly was adamant that he would not accept animals for mounts that were killed intentionally or violently. He would only accept animals that were killed due to natural causes. This was only the first book in the series, and I have yet to read the other two, but the romance, the mystery, all of it was very compelling. Super solid. One of the best books that I read this year in order to escape from work, adulting, etc., etc. All right, so my next book, or books, I guess, I also do not have. I am waiting for the box set to come out so I can have a pretty little box set. But this is the Crazy Rich Asians series by Kevin Kwan. If you've been with me for, I guess, any number of months, you'll probably know that this is officially now my new favorite series. This year, me and my husband went on a whole bunch of road trips. The road trip is about 6 hours long, and listening to an audiobook on 1.5 speed, we were able to knock out one of each book in the trilogy on every road trip that we went on, which was really cool. It's kind of like a bonding moment for us, and also these books are super good. So there's the first book here called Crazy Rich Asians, the second book called China Rich Girlfriend, and the last book, Rich People Problems. There's also a movie coming out later this year, and I am just so excited because I don't just get to see me, like one single Asian character on the screen, but the whole family. I get to see a family on screen in a movie theater that looks like my family. I've never had that before, and that's something that people can take for granted and don't really think about, and I've truly never had that experience in my life, so having this coming this year is just the best feeling for me. But back to the books. This is a fun, fast-moving contemporary series that follows follows an extended family who are Chinese and they live in Singapore. The book starts with our female protagonist, Rachel Chu. She lives in the States and with her hot professor boyfriend, Nick Young. Little does she know, he is one of the richest and most eligible bachelors in Singapore, and he takes her back to go and visit his family. And thus starts a beautiful and volatile journey through all three of these books. Not only is there like a manipulation of money, a strong dedication to family, but there is also a lot of gossip that emulates the differences between different dialects and countries and regions in East Asia, and the stereotypes and ingrained beliefs that have to do with history and prejudice that dates back really far into East Asian history that people in North America, probably the large majority of people in North America, don't really have any idea about unless they actually looked into it, and this is something that I grew up with. Apart from that, it's also just a lot of fun, gossipy, contemporary goodness. But I get to see myself in something that's just life, like it's just entertaining, and that's so cool. I'm super devoted to these characters. I remember listening to the audiobook, we were in the last 10%, like in the depths of the epilogue of the third book, and I was like, I don't want this to end. How many words are there left? Like, I'm never gonna see this family have new adventures again if this book ends. I'm just like envisioning my future when I have the box set on my bookshelf, like, hey look, that's the Young family. It's just such a heartwarming feeling, and it's really great to have that because I don't think I've ever had that, like I said, so it was a really cool year with this series for me. All right, my next book is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This was the first book this year that I was like, oh my god, that is my favorite book. I read The Unseen World first, but that was like a slow burn favorite book. This one was like, oh my god, it's my favorite immediately. But back on topic, this is about a magazine reporter whose name is Monique. She's kind of new at the magazine that she's working at, and we have our world superstar actress, 79-year-old Cuban bisexual badass lady, Evelyn Hugo. She's kind of gone into hiding after a very long career in acting, but she reaches out and requests that Monique write her tell-all biography. The thing that most people note about Evelyn is not the fact that she has had this extended successful acting career, but that she has been married to 7 husbands. That in and of itself is one of the themes of the book, how the media treat women in entertainment, especially during the time when Evelyn was out and about in acting. The good majority of the story is made up of Evelyn in her home telling Monique her life story, so we get to hear it in her words. She covers how back in the day, and I guess even now, women were extremely objectified in the entertainment industry. It was like her pregnant belly. Like really, she just maybe ate 2 pieces of bread. Like it's okay. We're gonna be okay. She also talks about what it's like being a woman of color in the industry. There are romantic relationships between 2 women, relationships between 2 men, and overall we see a true rewriting of history in Evelyn's own words, because her history in so many ways has been written by men and the men in her life, and now she's really reclaiming her history, taking back her agency and her voice in telling her own story to Monique, who she trusts very much for whatever reason that you will find out in the book to write her story. I had so many feelings throughout this book, and just as a personal thing, I really needed to feel that way about a book at that time. It was that really turbulent time where I was kind of like on and off BookTube, having a whole bunch of issues, and I was ready to throw in the towel. Books were just really flat to me at that time, and this made me feel something about books again. It saved my connection to reading this year, and I am so glad that this came into my life at the time that it did. Okay, so now we are getting into the depths of my top 10. This is like the penultimate top 4 books of the year. And before I start talking about book number 7, I will warn you that I really cannot support the creation of this audiobook, which I borrowed to the library and then very quickly returned because there were phrases used in this book, phrases and words that were in 2 different Chinese dialects, and the narrator obviously didn't speak Chinese and didn't really care to learn the tones, the pronunciation, etc., and she butchered the words so badly that some of them were unrecognizable. And because culture is so important here, I felt like it disrespected the character, the author, and the audience reading it that really wanted that connection to the language and to the history. So a big no to the audiobook, but that is 100% mutually exclusive of the actual content of the book, which is phenomenal, which is why it made it into my top 4 of the year. So I should probably tell you what that book is. This book is called Chemistry by Wei-Ke Wang. We have our unnamed Chinese narrator. It's written in 3rd person, and she is 3 years into grad school in a very rigorous chemistry program at a university in Boston. Her research is not going very well. She's not getting the results that her professor and her advisor are extremely particular on. They put a lot lot of pressure on their students. And the pressure is increasing on herself, from science, from her professor, from her parents, from her boyfriend, everyone. When the book opens, her long-term boyfriend has just recently proposed to her, and she's grappling with whether she wants to say yes or not because science and exacting work is so important to her, and he is also in academia, and he has no trouble getting the results that he and his professor want. So it's kind of like the age-old question, can we really be in a relationship with someone else if we are not happy with ourselves? And then the book goes from there. Out of the 10 books that I'm talking about in this video, this is the one that I am most hesitant to recommend to people. Some of the criticisms going around are that the narrator is complaining, she's achievement-oriented, all she cares about is work, if she just changed XYZ things would be different, and look, the narrator is going through a real shitty time, and we are deep inside her head, and I can guarantee you that when you or I are going through a shitty time, the inner thoughts, the very depths of your thoughts are probably not great for public consumption. Because I know for me, when I'm going through a hard time, I'm working things out, I'm trying things on, I might be mad at people, mad at myself, and even though that I know that I am feeling extremely lost, angry, sad, etc., I am okay with fully experiencing and really sitting in my feeling because I know that I'll help it pass if I acknowledge it and fully acknowledge that it's there. And this is exactly what the narrator is doing. She's sitting in her shit and she's figuring it out. This is a book that I needed 3 years ago, and I'm glad that it exists now. Some things that stood out were the extreme pressures from a rigorous career in academia, coming from a culture where collectivist beliefs are valued, moving into a culture where individualist beliefs are valued. So people that she encounters are just like, if you just change this belief of yours, then you'll fit in, including her boyfriend. And some of them don't know otherwise because they are the dominant discourse in society, and they always have been, so they've never been asked or forced to look outside. Because our narrator values precision and empirical evidence, there's a scene where she goes to a counselor, and she's originally super resistant when the therapist starts because the therapist starts doing some more like somatic, visceral body work type stuff, and she's really not into it. That's not the way that she speaks and communicates. This is the point that is extremely genius of the author because it's from our narrator's point of view. We see a click and some rapport being built therapeutically when the therapist does a reframe of the concept she's talking about and reflects things a little bit more cognitively and less somatically. It's just so smart of the author because that is the moment where that reframe happens that the narrator's like, wow, I can maybe get on board with this therapy thing. It's so cool. I think in order to appreciate this book, those little nuances have to be part of your awareness. And that's not saying like, oh my god, I appreciate this book and you don't. That's not what I'm trying to say at all. But it really speaks how the little pieces of a book can affect each reader differently, especially if they have different pieces of their identity and their worldview. The next book on my top 4 of the year is You Bring the Distant Near by Mitali Perkins. This is a YA book that spans 3 generations of a Bengali family, originally starting in Bangladesh, then they moved to London, and then to Queens in New York. We follow 5 girls in the family, and we meet them all when they are teenagers. When the story moves on to spotlight one generation younger, we see the women in the previous generation that we just followed as kind of like side characters in that portion of the story, which is so smart because now it's like we're growing up with the entire family. So starting with the oldest generation, we have Rani Das, and she is married to her husband Rajiv. Rani is struggling because they are moving so much, and she's struggling to fit in every place she moves, so her demeanor is extremely stern. Rajiv, though, is dad goals. He's really warm, kind, compassionate. Rani, over the course of the book, experiences so much character growth. Her character growth throughout the book, I think, is the best that I have read all year. So moving down a generation, Rani has 2 daughters, Tara, who loves acting, and Sonia, who is my favorite character in the book. She starts out with an extreme love of reading. Everywhere she goes, she's like, do they have a library? And then she grows up a little bit more and she becomes a fierce women's rights advocate. Moving down another generation, I love this generation too. We have Sonia's daughter, Shanti. She is half Bengali and half black. And then we also have Anna, who was born and raised in Mumbai and then moves to Queens. So we follow them. They go to the same high school. So a lot of their story, that generation, centers around their high school. And at their high school at that time, a 9/11 was going on. So we see a lot of the Islamophobic attitudes that come out after that. There's also an issue at their high school regarding girls who choose to dress modestly and their rights at school, and examining privilege in an interracial relationship in this generation. So what I think is amazing about this book all stems back to my favorite TED Talk, which is by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, called The Danger of a Single Story. She talks about how stereotypes aren't necessarily untrue, and they only tell one story, which is not the only story. And in this book, there are 5 different women. They are all women of color raised in the same family, but they they all have different stories, so it breaks down stereotypes while still acknowledging each individual person's history. I can't say enough good things about this book. This was my favorite YA book of the year. I would highly, highly recommend it. I think it's so smart in so many different ways. And you guys probably already know that multi-generational novels are absolutely my favorite. They just have these huge scopes, and they do it in like, what, 300, 400 pages. Like, they always just blow my mind. Book number 9 is the only book in this video that was not published in 2017, but I read it in 2017, so I don't care. This is the December pick for my Storytime with Squibbles book club, and I think I killed the people in my book club with how beautiful and emotionally harrowing this book is. And this book is What Lies Between Us by Naomi Mudawira. It starts off in first-person perspective from our unnamed narrator. She's sitting in a jail cell for committing some crime. We don't know much about the crime apart from the fact that it has to do with her being a mother. We then start at the beginning of her journey in her childhood in Sri Lanka, and we see her grow up. Something truly, truly awful happens, and then the narrator and her mother immigrate to California. She has these just awful, awful trauma symptoms, and it results in some behavior in this book that isn't necessarily what people would think are like nice behaviors. But this is the truth. This is this woman's reality, and we see her start to break from reality, and the consequences of her behavior become more harmful and more deep-seated. I can tell you that this explores trauma and death and immigration of a Sri Lankan woman and collectivist beliefs in motherhood and all that jazz, but that would do this book absolutely no justice. What I will say is this is some of the best writing that I have read in my entire life. In one of the books in my worst books of the year video, there were just so many excess words. They used really and super and just tons of modifiers like that. They also would explain everything twice, so there were just so many superfluous words in that book. This book is the exact opposite of that. It is crisp, it is sharp, every single word is intentional, and as you can tell, this book is not extremely long, but it's so exacting and purposeful that it doesn't need to be. The descriptions of a tree, nature, thoughts, feelings, they all tie together in some way. They're all cohesive, and that's what makes this so heartbreaking, is that every word plays a piece in this woman's story. When we really get into any person's life, everything that they think or do is a result of how their brain has formed patterns that help them react and adapt and interact with other people and events. This writing is the clearest indicator of that type of psychology, and that is why it's so personal, and I am so obsessed with this book. I'm so glad that I picked it for December. And the final book that I'm going to talk about today, you have probably heard me wax poetic about this book, but that is because it is a damn good book, and that is Sorry to Disrupt the Peace by Patty Yumi Cottrell. It is written in first person from the perspective of Helen Moran. She's a woman in her 30s. At the beginning of the book, she's waiting for a furniture delivery when she receives a call that lets her know that her brother has died by suicide. She quickly packs up and goes back to her small Milwaukee town where her parents are, and we learn that she is a Korean immigrant who has been adopted by white parents, and she points out that the characteristics that are most important to her about them are that they are very tied to their church and they are very stingy with their money. She embarks into her own exploration of her brother's life before he died, trying to put the pieces together, and along the way we see her dealing in her own way with her grief and her confusion, as well as where she is in that moment and exploring different parts of her identity, including her sexuality. Helen is both introverted and introspective, so when she finds out information from different people that she talks to about her brother's life and her brother's death, she processes that information and she realizes the effect that it has on herself and the empathy for herself and for others because of her job as a social worker for underprivileged youth. We see this in the author's amazing description of the most minute yet so profound visceral reactions and shifts in Helen. It's remarkable. I've never read anything like it before. The author sketches out her character with no inhibitions, so we get to see her very innermost thoughts, no matter how gross or offbeat we may think they are as readers. At different points in the book, we see her trying on different words or ideas with her identity, just trying to see if that's where she lands at that moment in time in her life. She's like, yeah, maybe this fits, or I don't know, I'll try this for a little while and see if it fits where I am right now. And as readers, we're challenged, but in a gentle way, to be comfortable with her being uncomfortable. This is another author that is incredibly intelligent because we are able to see Helen from her brother's eyes, because she finds a piece of her brother's writing where her brother is writing about his opinions about her. The title, Sorry to Disrupt the Peace, is so fitting because the book shows what happens when we question the comfort and question the blinders that people can put up regarding their beliefs and when we disrupt their peace. There is also dispelling of false beliefs and doing away with stigma around things like mental health and suicide. This book has actually changed my life in a way that I can't explain. It changes the way that I read, the way that I appreciate words and writing, and I'm just so intensely grateful for this book. It's something that I can't put into words, and is truly one of the best experiences that I've ever had in my reading life. So that's it. We reached the end of my top 10 books of the year. Go ahead and leave down in the comments what was your favorite book that you read in 2017. I just want to say a big thank you to you guys for sticking with me through 2017, even though I was away for 5 months and complaining on Twitter, whatever. We're all here now. We are a big happy family. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you had a wonderful New Year's, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.